No, no way, you are!
What do you see?
The symbol, the seal symbol, this can't be faked.
Were you?
Were you in Team 6?
I'm just a janitor. You're seeing wrong.
Quiet black janitor was mocked at the SEAL gym until someone recognized the tattoo on his neck. True warriors are measured not by the uniforms they wear, but by the battles they've survived and the dignity they maintain when the world fails to see their worth. James Bull Miller stopped mopping when SEAL candidate Jake Morrison grabbed the mop from his hands. "Dance for us, janitor," Jake laughed. Bull's fingers instinctively touched the faded tattoo on his neck, the one that told a story no young warrior could imagine surviving. At 62, Bull Miller had been invisible at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center for 15 years, cleaning up after warriors half his age who saw only an old black man in work clothes. Jake Morrison, 24, thought his trident pin made him untouchable until he humiliated someone whose battles had earned legends. What began as casual cruelty would expose a hero hiding in plain sight, ignite a fight for honor that reached the Pentagon, and teach an entire generation of warriors that respect isn't given with rank, it's earned through sacrifice they couldn't comprehend. Naval Special Warfare Training Center, Coronado, California, March 2024. The gym's morning fog rolled in from the Pacific while SEAL candidates pushed themselves beyond human limits. In the corners where shadows gathered support staff like Bull moved invisibly ghosts in a world that only saw warriors. Bull knew every scar on these walls from 15 years of dawn arrivals. He'd watched thousands of young men chase dreams of becoming SEALs while he emptied their trash and cleaned their sweat from equipment that cost more than his annual salary. The facility buzzed with testosterone and ambition. New generation candidates came seeking Instagram fame as much as service. They saw Bull's weathered face and assumed poverty, ignorance, defeat, never recognizing that some scars come from battles they'd never be asked to fight. This morning felt different. Jake Morrison had been building toward something cruel, his pack following like hungry wolves. Bull had survived worse predators, but these boys didn't know they were playing with dynamite wrapped in janitor's clothes. Master Chief James Bull Miller earned his nickname carrying wounded Marines through Vietnamese jungle when a 190 pounds of muscle could move faster with casualties than most men could run alone. The tattoo on his neck, Force Recon Eagle Globe and Anchor, with dates only military historians would recognize, was earned in blood on missions that didn't officially exist. 3 tours, Navy Cross for single-handedly holding LZ under fire while extracting wounded team. 2 Purple Hearts when shrapnel couldn't slow him down. Bronze Star when his radio calls guided rescue missions through impossible terrain. Agent Orange took his health in 1987. Medical discharge ended a career that classified operations couldn't celebrate. The government that sent him to die in secret jungles gave him a pension and told him to disappear quietly. Bull chose this job because military facilities felt like home when civilian world treated him like dangerous anachronism. Here, surrounded by weapons and warriors, he could remember who he'd been before arthritis and chemical poisoning made him a janitor that young soldiers dismissed. Every morning at 0500, Bull arrived before anyone else. Not for the minimum wage, for the sound of boots on deck plates, the smell of gun oil, the rhythm of military precision that kept his heart beating in time with purpose he'd never fully lost. His silence wasn't shame. It was protection. Too many heroes had been destroyed by accusations they couldn't defend when classified records remained buried. Better to mop floors with dignity than fight battles that truth couldn't win in courtrooms that secrets couldn't enter. Bull's daily humiliation represented more than personal cruelty. It was institutional failure when military values were being corrupted through generational disconnect that social media warrior culture had created. Jake's mockery would trigger something Bull had kept buried for decades, not just his service record, but his willingness to fight for respect that silence couldn't preserve when honor demanded standing up despite consequences. The developing crisis would test whether classified heroism could survive false accusations when stolen valor investigations were weapons that corrupt officers could wield against inconvenient truths. This wasn't just about one old janitor and one arrogant candidate. This was about what America did to its heroes when they became inconvenient reminders of wars the nation wanted to forget. "Dance, old man." Jake Morrison yanked the mop from Bull's hands, splattering dirty water across the gym floor where other candidates gathered like spectators at a gladiator match. Bull stood, slowly arthritis, making the movement deliberate. His eyes met Jake's 62 years of survival instinct, calculating angles, distances, weaknesses that young warrior couldn't recognize. "You want me to dance?" Bull's voice was quiet steel. "Son, last time someone made me dance, I left him in a Vietnamese rice paddy with his throat opened ear to ear." The words cut through gym noise like gunfire. Conversation stopped. Equipment clanged to silence. Even Jake stepped back when predator energy radiated from man they dismissed as harmless. "You threatening me, janitor?" "Just explaining why I don't dance anymore." Bull reached for the mop with movements that had once moved through jungle at night, killing sentries who never heard death coming. "But if you want to keep playing games, we can step outside where there's no witnesses to clean up afterward." The challenge hung in air, thick with testosterone and sudden fear. This wasn't broken old man. This was something else wearing janitor's uniform. Master Chief Carlos Rodriguez had been watching from the office when instinct screamed danger in familiar voice. He'd heard that tone before in operators who'd seen too much killed, too many survived too long. Moving closer, Rodriguez saw what others missed: Bull's stance weight distribution hands that had forgotten how to be civilian despite decades of practice, and they're barely visible above the collar tattoo that made his blood run cold. Force Recon, Vietnam era. Jesus Christ. Rodriguez's own father had served with Force Recon. Stories whispered around family dinners about Marines who went places that didn't exist, did things that never happened, came back changed in ways that civilian life couldn't heal. The investigation that Jake's accusations would trigger could destroy more than one man's reputation. If Bull was legitimate and every instinct screamed he was then stolen, valor charges would become nightmare for everyone involved. "Need to defuse this before it explodes," Rodriguez muttered, moving toward confrontation that was about to become bloodbath. But Bull had made decision that 15 years of silence couldn't prevent anymore. Some battles chose their time, and Jake Morrison had just chosen his. "Morrison, back off." Rodriguez's command carried authority that even arrogant candidates couldn't ignore completely. "Master Chief, I was just having fun with the janitor. No harm intended." "Fun?" Bull's laugh was sound that veterans recognized humor found in places where sanity went to die. "Boy, you want fun? Let me show you how we had fun in Cambodia when rules didn't exist and coming home wasn't guaranteed. Jake's face went white. Cambodia meant classified operations, black missions, ghost soldiers who killed in silence and vanished like smoke. "You're lying, old man like you." Bull moved, not fast by young standards, but with efficiency that violence had perfected through necessity. Jake found himself face down on gym floor with arthritic knee pressed against his spine and voice whispering in ear like death itself. "I've killed better men than you with my bare hands. Now you can apologize and walk away, or we can find out if 15 years of mopping floors has made me soft." The gym was cemetery quiet. Rodriguez had his phone out, calling numbers that existed above normal chain of command. "This is Rodriguez at Special Warfare Training. Need immediate background verification on civilian contractor James Miller. Priority Alpha classification." Humiliation burned in Jake Morrison's chest like acid. Being taken down by a janitor in front of his peers was career death in warrior culture that respected only strength. "I'm filing charges. Assault threatening a military member impersonating a veteran. That old bastard is going down." Jake's connections included his father, Representative Tom Morrison, House Armed Services Committee member, who owed favors to defense contractors that corruption investigations could expose. "Dad, I need help. Some psycho janitor attacked me, claims he's decorated veteran. Something's wrong here, and I want him destroyed." Commander Patricia Hawkins saw opportunity in crisis. Rodriguez's integrity had been blocking procurement deals worth millions in kickbacks that retirement fund needed for comfortable future. Formal investigation initiated. Rodriguez failed to properly vet contractor with potential stolen valor issues. Both men will be suspended pending federal review. But Rodriguez had backup that Hawkins didn't expect. His call to Pentagon had reached Marine Corps Commandant General Patricia Washington, who remembered James Miller from classified briefings that few living officers had clearance to attend. "Rodriguez, you just opened door that some people spent decades keeping closed. Hope you're ready for what comes out." Jake's story leaked to press through channels that political connections could access, despite military attempts to control narrative through information management. Stolen valor investigation at SEAL Training Center. Janitor claims decorated service while threatening military members. But Bull's response to media attention surprised everyone. Instead of hiding, he agreed to interview that would either vindicate him completely or destroy him permanently. "Tired of hiding. If they want war, let's have war. Time to see if America remembers who fought for her when fighting meant dying." Veteran organizations split when stories began circulating about possible stolen valor case at highest levels of military training. Vietnam Veterans of America demanded investigation, while disabled American veterans urged patience pending evidence review. If James Miller is legitimate hero being persecuted for race and class, this becomes civil rights disaster. If he's fraud, it damages every real veteran's credibility, VVA spokesman declared. Local San Diego community rallied around Bull when neighbors remembered 15 years of quiet dignity, helping with groceries, checking on elderly residents, never asking for recognition that service should have earned. "Bull Miller fixed my car when I couldn't afford mechanic, watched my kids when husband was deployed, never mentioned military background, despite questions about scars." Neighbor testified. Congressional attention intensified when Representative Morrison's influence collided with Pentagon secrecy. That classification required maintaining, despite political pressure, that transparency demanded providing. House Armed Services Committee demanding immediate briefing on security protocols that allowed potentially fraudulent contractor access to sensitive facilities, Morrison announced. Bull's decision to fight back after 15 years of silence represented fundamental change when dignity required defending, despite consequences that revelation might create through exposure. Spent too many years invisible, letting people assume what they wanted because keeping secrets was easier than fighting battles that truth couldn't win in civilian courts. But watching that boy mock everything I've bled for while his daddy's political connections protect him from consequences, that's where silence ends and war begins. Rodriguez's moral courage under career threat demonstrated leadership that promotion should recognize when integrity mattered more than advancement, that compromise could have provided more easily. Know what I saw in that man's eyes when he moved? Same look my father had when nightmares came. Combat veterans recognize each other, and James Miller is real deal regardless of paperwork. Jake's growing doubt about his accusations began when research revealed gaps in military records that classification rather than fraud might explain through security requirements that public access couldn't accommodate. Something doesn't add up. If he's fake, why isn't Pentagon shutting this down immediately? Why are people I trust telling me to drop it? Pentagon Classification Review was revealing records that decades of secrecy had been protecting when operations required deniability, that historical accuracy had been sacrificed to maintain. Miller's file contains operations that didn't officially exist, conducted by units that were never activated in countries we weren't fighting in, Pentagon liaison reported to investigators. Declassification requires presidential authorization when foreign policy implications could affect current diplomatic relationships that historical revelations might complicate. Federal investigation was expanding beyond stolen valor when financial audit had discovered irregularities in contractor relationships that Commander Hawkins' corruption had been facilitating through fraudulent billing schemes. Following money trail reveals $2.3 million in questionable contracts that single officer approved despite competitive bidding requirements that regulations mandate following. Bull's health was deteriorating under stress when Agent Orange effects were being exacerbated by emotional strain that decades of suppressed trauma couldn't be expected to endure indefinitely. Doctor says stress could trigger heart attack, stroke, complete physical breakdown. Man his age shouldn't be fighting battles that younger people should be handling. Political pressure was building when Representative Morrison's demands for immediate resolution were colliding with Pentagon's need for careful review that accuracy, rather than speed, should prioritize. James Miller's service record has been declassified by direct order of the President of the United States. General Patricia Washington's call to investigation team carried weight that political pressure couldn't override. Operation Phoenix, Cambodia, 1969-1971. Operation Cherry Laos, 1970. Operation Blackjack, North Vietnam, 1971. Master Chief Miller participated in missions that officially never happened, conducted by Marines who officially never existed. The revelation hit investigation team like artillery strike. This wasn't stolen valor case. This was classified hero whose service had been buried so deep that normal verification was impossible. Navy Cross citation for extraordinary heroism while serving as Team Leader Force Reconnaissance Company. Master Chief Miller single-handedly held landing zone under intense enemy fire, enabling extraction of 12 wounded Marines. When ammunition was exhausted, continued defense with captured enemy weapons until reinforcement arrived. 3 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with Combat Vi, Presidential Unit Citation for operations that strategic objectives required completing despite political deniability that congressional oversight couldn't be permitted to discover. Commander Hawkins' corruption investigation accelerated when Pentagon attention had revealed financial schemes that distraction from legitimate heroes' persecution had been designed to provide cover for through misdirection. Patricia Hawkins arrested on federal charges conspiracy to defraud government accepting bribes, obstruction of justice, procurement fraud totaling $2.3 million designed to finance comfortable retirement through taxpayer theft. Jake Morrison's world collapsed when hero worship became horror at his own ignorance that politics couldn't protect him from, despite family connections, that accountability was more powerful than. Jesus Christ, I called him fraud. I humiliated genuine war hero because he was Black Janitor, and I was too arrogant to see past uniform he wasn't wearing anymore. Bull's hospitalization came when stress-induced heart attack had been triggered by decades of suppressed trauma. That current crisis couldn't be weathered through without medical intervention that age made necessary. Cardiac event caused by acute stress reaction. Patient's Agent Orange exposure has compromised cardiovascular system beyond normal tolerance that emotional strain has exceeded through sustained pressure. Prognosis uncertain. Survival depends on eliminating stress factors that investigation and media attention continue creating despite medical necessity that recovery requires providing. Rodriguez faced court-martial when his support for Bull was being characterized as failure of command oversight that regulations required enforcing through proper channels despite moral correctness that integrity had guided. Master Chief Rodriguez charged with dereliction of duty failure to report suspected security violation insubordination when direct orders required pursuing investigation despite personal beliefs about contractor legitimacy. Community rallied when Bull's hospitalization had revealed extent of emotional damage that institutional neglect had been inflicting through systematic dismissal of veteran whose service couldn't be acknowledged publicly. Vigil outside hospital organized by Vietnam veterans' neighbors, even some SEAL candidates who recognized truth when politics and pride were stripped away from simple human decency. Media narrative shifted when declassified records had proven stolen valor. Accusations were persecution of legitimate hero, whose silence had been protection rather than deception through security that classification demanded. Retraction, James Miller confirmed as decorated Marine Force reconnaissance veteran, whose classified service record includes operations that historical significance cannot be overstated despite secrecy requirements. Bull's recovery began when purpose had been provided through recognition that 15 years of invisibility couldn't be continued when teaching required visibility despite personal preference for anonymity. Doctor says, anger is keeping me alive. Anger at system that discards heroes when they become inconvenient. Anger at young warriors who don't understand price that freedom requires paying. But anger isn't enough anymore. These boys need education about respect, about history, about cost of freedom that their training doesn't cover adequately despite tactical competence. Jake Morrison's transformation began with genuine remorse when research had revealed depth of his ignorance about man whose service record included missions that special operations communities still studied. Master Chief Miller, I owe you apology that words can't provide adequately. How do you ask forgiveness from someone whose sacrifice made your freedom possible when ignorance nearly destroyed his honor? Pentagon decision was announced when presidential attention had been attracted through case that national values were being tested by through treatment of classified heroes whose service deserved recognition. James Miller will receive Presidential Medal of Freedom for extraordinary service during classified operations that strategic success required conducting despite personal cost that sacrifice entailed through commitment. East Room, White House, 6 months after Bull's heart attack. Military precision filled space that history had consecrated through ceremonies honoring America's finest when service demanded recognition that politics couldn't diminish. Master Chief James Miller represents finest tradition of American military service. His classified operations during Vietnam War demonstrated extraordinary heroism that national security required keeping secret until historical perspective allowed acknowledgement. Bull stood at attention despite arthritis, heart condition, Agent Orange effects that decades of silent suffering had endured without complaint. That weakness couldn't be permitted to show despite physical cost. Mr. President accepted missions because oath required it. Honor belongs to Marines who didn't come home rather than those fortunate enough to survive when chance rather than skill determined outcome. Jake Morrison attended ceremony as Bull's guest when redemption had required earning through service that humility rather than arrogance was beginning to guide. Despite political connections, that character had become more important then. Watching real hero receive recognition he's deserved for 50 years. Learning what warrior actually means when courage is measured in decades rather than moments. Family reunion included nephew Marcus Miller, active duty Marine whose pride in Uncle service had been vindicated through revelation that family stories were historical facts rather than exaggerated legends. Miller Mentorship Program, established with Bull as senior advisor, when wisdom earned through combat could guide training. That character rather than capability alone should be emphasizing through personal interaction. Every SEAL candidate spends week with Master Chief Miller learning military history that includes stories of heroes who served without recognition when missions required secrecy, but honor demanded service regardless. Bull's teaching style was storytelling rather than lecture, when experience could provide lessons that textbooks couldn't duplicate through authentic narrative that young warriors could understand through human connection. Cambodia, 1970. Mission was rescue American pilot whose F-4 got shot down over territory we weren't supposed to be in. Pilot was black like me, scared kid from Detroit whose mama was praying he'd come home. Extracted under fire while NVA closed in from 3 sides, pilot lived, got medical discharge, became doctor in Chicago. Still sends Christmas cards 40 years later because someone believed his life was worth dying for. Jake Morrison's transformation accelerated through direct mentorship when personal attention had provided guidance that group training couldn't duplicate, through individual relationship that respect had replaced mockery through. Master Chief teaches that warrior isn't defined by weapons carried, but by values maintained when testing reveals character beneath uniform that anyone can wear, but not everyone can honor. Teaching extended beyond SEAL candidates when Bull's story had attracted attention from educational institutions. That character development, rather than academic achievement, should be emphasizing through moral foundation. Morning routine at training center changed completely when Master Chief Miller's office became gathering place for candidates seeking guidance that experience, rather than theory, could provide through authentic wisdom. Door stays open. Coffee's always hot. Stories are free for anyone willing to listen and learn from mistakes that survival required making when options were kill or die. Evening sessions included family calls when Bull's advice had become resource for parents struggling with children whose military service was creating challenges that civilian understanding couldn't address adequately. Your son's not broken because war changed him. He's carrying weight that freedom requires someone to bear. Help him find purpose that makes burden meaningful rather than just painful. Marriage to retired Army nurse Colonel Elizabeth Torres celebrated partnership when shared military experience provided foundation that mutual understanding of service sacrifice could build lasting relationship upon. Jake Morrison's leadership development reflected humility. That genuine courage had replaced arrogance through education. That character, rather than competence, should guide decision-making under pressure. Leading by example means admitting mistakes, learning from people you previously dismissed, earning respect rather than demanding it through position that temporary assignment provides. Congressional testimony before House Armed Services Committee addressed institutional failures that his father's political pressure had initially supported before truth had required acknowledging error. Military effectiveness depends on recognizing excellence regardless of race, rank, or visibility. When contributions matter more than politics, that advancement typically requires navigating successfully. Mentoring younger candidates became Jake's mission when experience had taught lessons about respect that classroom instruction couldn't duplicate. Through personal relationship, that growth required maintaining. Coronado community embraced Bull completely when Hero's recognition had provided opportunity for healing racial tensions that military precision couldn't eliminate through regulation, but personal relationships could address. Local businesses establishing veteran preference programs, educational scholarships, community support services that appreciation could demonstrate through action rather than empty Memorial Day speeches. Speaking engagements across country provided platform when Bull's message about hidden heroism resonated with audiences that cynicism about institutions had been affecting through disappointment that individual excellence could overcome. Heroes don't need uniforms to serve. Some of greatest warriors are fighting battles that recognition can't acknowledge, but community should support through understanding rather than judgment. Miller Foundation for Character Development established permanent legacy when federal grants could sustain programs that Bull's individual effort had initiated through institutional support that continuity required. Healthcare improvements for Agent Orange victims reflected political attention that Bull's case had attracted when classified heroes deserved medical care that service had earned regardless of secrecy requirements. 2 years later, Character Development Program has transformed SEAL training culture when respect for all personnel became foundational principle that effectiveness requires maintaining through consistent application. Bull Miller's influence extends to corporate leadership training when character under pressure translates to business environments that integrity, rather than politics, should guide through trustworthy decision-making. Jake Morrison, promoted to lieutenant commander, credits Bull's mentorship for advancement that leadership earned through character development rather than family connections that competence should supersede. Racist incidents at military training facilities reduced by plant when education about hidden heroism helps personnel recognize excellence that appearance might initially obscure through superficial judgment. Bull Miller's transformation from invisible janitor to recognized mentor created paradigm shift when character development became priority equal to tactical training through curriculum that values alongside skills could teach effectively. Jake Morrison's evolution demonstrated that humility could be learned when authentic role models provided guidance that arrogance couldn't survive through personal relationship that growth required sustaining over time. Rodriguez's vindication and promotion reflected institutional recognition that moral courage under pressure demonstrated leadership qualities that advancement should acknowledge when integrity guided decisions despite career risks. Hawkins' conviction eliminated systematic corruption while sending message that financial schemes at veterans' expense would be prosecuted to maximum extent that justice demanded when trust violations required strongest response. Miller method, adopted by Special Operations Commands worldwide when character assessment proved essential for mission success. That technical competence alone couldn't guarantee under pressure that moral foundation determined outcomes. Veteran employment programs influenced by Bull's experience serve thousands annually, when institutional recognition of military skills could overcome civilian prejudice that race and class had been perpetuating despite qualifications. Educational institutions integrated Bull's story when curricula about hidden heroism provided character development that academic subjects couldn't duplicate through authentic examples of service that recognition couldn't diminish. International military partnerships incorporated American innovation in character-based training. When allied nations recognized that warrior development required moral foundation matching tactical competence through integrated education approaches. Legislative changes improved veteran health care and benefits. When Bull's case had demonstrated institutional obligation to care for classified heroes whose service couldn't be acknowledged publicly but deserved support privately. Bull's journey from silence to voice demonstrated that dignity maintained through adversity could eventually receive acknowledgement, that patience, rather than protest, had been required for achieving when timing allowed truth. His marriage to Elizabeth created partnership that shared understanding of military service provided foundation for when mutual respect for sacrifice enabled relationship that civilian life couldn't replicate adequately. Community leadership extended influence beyond military when civilian recognition of character had inspired broader applications of values that service had developed through experience that teaching could share. Jake's ongoing mentorship of new candidates reflected complete transformation when helping others avoid his mistakes became mission that personal growth had motivated through authentic change rather than political necessity. True warriors are measured not by the uniforms they wear, but by the battles they've survived and the dignity they maintain when the world fails to see their worth proving that heroism often walks among us in silence, carrying valor like a secret until someone with eyes to recognize honor finds the courage to defend it against ignorance that prejudice mistakes for judgment. Their story demonstrated that respect transcends circumstances when character is maintained through adversity, inspiring thousands to look beyond appearances and recognize that heroism wears many uniforms, while teaching lessons about service that no classroom could provide through lived experience, that sacrifice makes authentic and love makes possible to share with others.